Hello everyone, welcome. This is live from the studio. Today I've got Nathan Moody with me and talk about music, mastering, making modular synth music. All right, let's launch the intro. Welcome everyone. I've got Nathan with me. Hi Nathan.
Hey Franck, how are you?
Good. So everyone, if you're online, please don't forget to click subscribe, like, everything. The Alphaster is here. Hello. This is about to get ready to mod the Bender streams too. At the same time. We'll start to show up on the stream. Good. Right. I wanted to talk about Bandcamp on June 19th, so I think next Friday. They have decided to give their fees the NACP. So if you are thinking about purchasing anything on Bandcamp, right time. They are doing event like this. Also, once a month now, they waive their fees, so that it goes to. I see Sensor Music has joined us too. Hi, Sensor. Right. Taking that. All here. All right. Okay. What else do you have? Oh yes, also on Bandcamp. Oh, this is not really Bandcamp, but. Somebody started a list of all black artists, producer. You will find it that on the Black Bandcamp info link in the chat. There we go. So if you want to check the nice list, and I've seen also several local people from like M.0, Ikishola. I forgot the list. There's a few people from. So let's start with. So, Nathan, thank you very much for coming on this show. I've started to run it. I was looking for a slot which was convenient for me and for people. I think that's 4, 5, 6 shows that I've been doing every Saturday. Convenient during the work from home period because I'm at home. I don't go out on week. And had in the past, so I had Phuturo, which performed with me FM Plus event. I had KZLuna, who ran the podcast and also ran Peaked. I had Hugo Paris and Hugo R.A. Paris, sorry. And I've had, oh my, they just shut down. That's not cool. Okay, the stream is coming back. Let me check what's happening on YouTube. That looks like live. Okay. Everything is okay. We are still live. Streaming, watching 8 minutes. Hi, Bill Fetzer. Sorry, I'm checking that my bandwidth is okay. Panic in the studio. All right. I think we should be okay. Okay, coming back home. The bandwidth is not that great. Hopefully it should be okay. I'm recording it, so worst case scenario, I'm going to re-upload it if. Also, I've got okay, so Bill Fetzer, Sensor Music. I've got Malarkey coming in. Right, so Okay, so I'm a little bit lost. So, Nathan, I always start by this question: who are you?
Well, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and right now I spend most of my time as a mastering engineer and an audio editor and a sound designer. I also produce music under my own name, and I've been making music in some way, shape, or form for almost 30 years. I've been releasing albums for about 20 and try to stay out of trouble. I have a background also in visual arts, design, motion graphics, so I'm definitely pretty broadly skilled as a creative professional prior to my current career in being a full-time audio professional.
Yeah, that's cool. And I don't listen to some of your impromptu concert at Robot Speak during the Church of the Super Surge. I think also you came at Resonant Frequency. I don't know if I saw you at Resident. Many people all over the place. That's nice. San Francisco, there's quite a nice community and a lot of events.
Yeah, what I have always liked about living here, I've been in the Bay Area now for actually about 30 years now, is just the scenes here are just super diverse in terms of who participates, the genres they operate in and around and between. And it's always been, even when things got really expensive and a lot of artists started to get displaced, there's a eclecticism, I think, in the Bay Area music scene that I find just constantly inspiring.
Yes, it's interesting, and I started to dive a little bit into the history of electronic music in the area, and it's cool. Like FM was created here. Yeah, you've got Buchla, you've got Smith Electronic, EMU system. So it's really nice when you dive in here and what's still going on.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place to be because ever since Fairchild Electronics started up in Silicon Valley, this has always been kind of an interesting hub between where the arts and technology intersect. And so I think that's why you've seen things like the San Francisco Tape Music, or San Francisco Tape Music Center back in the 60s. Like you said, people like Dave Smith, the invention of FM synthesis at Stanford. I think that's why San Francisco has this interesting, unique place in electronic music history.
Yes, indeed. And it's nice that got this modular event. I think later on we have a piece of you with the modular case, which is just behind you. So you were talking also that you are also an audio engineer, mastering engineer.
Yep.
At that, yeah. And you've released you've been mastering a few albums for, I guess, many people. I think the last one, well, there was a nice presentation with Einbach on. Really nice to see, before and after mastering. Yeah, a little bit. That was on the. I think also you work with M.0. Just released an album like.
Yeah, we're 3 albums in actually with Maurice, Jackson, and I. And that's one of the things I like the most about mastering is like, yes, I took a huge amount of pride and joy in, trying to just eke out that last 1 to 10% of quality and impact out of other people's music. And I find that very rewarding. But what I really find the most rewarding are the relationships that I build and the fact that a lot of my clients are return clients. And we start to get into this longer term relationship and I get to see without having to own a record label, I get to see my clients' creative progression over time as their sound gets honed or shifts or changes, and I just find that endlessly interesting.
Yes, and yes, also and the progress, and yeah, I got one of my album mastering. It was also really interesting. Mainly work alone, so working with somebody else, get this interaction, understanding some of we were talking earlier, some of the musical term, like.
Well, Franck, you bring up a really good point, which is that I think that due to the nature of music technology, which we were just talking about, and the advent of being able to make electronic music or any kind of music in one's home and one's own bedroom, I think it creates this kind of false assumption that everyone has to be a lone wolf and work on their own. And a lot of people like yourself are really good at it and enjoy the aspects of marketing one's own music, mixing one's own music, mastering one's own music, having a social media presence to support mind share and marketing and advertising. But a lot of my clients want to just be artists and they just want to be musicians. And I think one of the other things I find really exciting about being an audio engineer and a mastering engineer specifically is that I can help people just not worry about that part of the process. And I can help people just basically get them a little bit closer to realizing the fullest expression being rendered into a listener's ear. And so I find that, carving off that cognitive space for artists who don't want to go there or aren't interested, even if they're good at it, some people just don't want to have that be part of their personal practice. I find that really fulfilling.
Yes, and sometimes you want to focus on the good at or what, even if you know to handle it, which sometimes is nice because then you choose the right person. The work is. They want to just focus on music. Mm-hmm. But it's nice also to have a community to get some feedback, and the time to learn things is taking a little bit longer because you're not in a room with somebody that I like that. Right, this thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole difference.
One of the interesting tensions in being a mastering engineer is that inevitably I will master someone's album, and about 1 out of every 5 albums I master, I get asked like, well, thank you, it sounds better. What did you think? And they're not asking from a technical standpoint, they're asking from an aesthetic standpoint. And I have lots of opinions because I'm a musical progressive. I don't think the world's best music has been made yet. I don't, listen to music that I listened to in high school. I listen to the newest music that's always coming out. But it's a hard question to answer sometimes because does it matter what I think of it aesthetically? As when I have the mastering engineer hat on, I would argue it doesn't matter what I think aesthetically. What really matters is, do I understand what the artist is going for, and have they communicated to me what their vision and creative intent is, so that I can render it, more clearly in the mastering process. So I have to, be very careful and kind of take my mastering hat off and then put my music fan hat on. And, I usually refuse to give much aesthetic input until the project is over. Then once the project is over, I'll say, oh yeah, it totally reminded me of this, and I like this part, and that's fine. But you have to be really careful about separating those two aspects of your skill and the services you're delivering versus your taste.
Yes, indeed. I see a few people that have joined. I think as talk about sensor music. I see Colorado Modular Synth Society is here, Sign Mountain, Malarkey, Alphaster, HR Terror. Who else do I have? I see Schmuster and Mariana Novakovic, so everybody is saying hi. Yes, if you want to ask a question to Nathan, then please type them in the chat and I'll relay them. So, please. And I see Benjamin Iso also, who say hi. So yeah, if you have a question, please type them in the chat. Don't forget to click also like, subscribe, follow. It's on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Mixer, and Periscope, wherever you are. So we were talking about mastering other people's album. Maybe let's talk about your album. So Lazulam was your last album?
Yeah, that came out on May 1st on Modular Field Records out of Cologne, Germany.
And you say also, do you have some projects on new albums and new music?
Yeah, Lazulam was a fun project because that's the first kind of real sequel album I've ever done. It was kind of a sequel to the Blue Box record I did about 3 years ago as part of my Etudes series of exploring very small modular synths or modular synth setups. So really kind of working out the exercise and constraints, and the Blue Box wound up being the one modular synthesizer I owned that I never in my studio, and it's exactly the same settings. In fact, our Benny came over one time and he upgraded it to the Parasites firmware, and I changed it back. So it's interesting to kind of have developed a modular system that is just kind of really feels done and hasn't changed literally in 3 years. In terms of what else is going on post Lazulam, there's a bunch of albums in the pipeline. I tend to be pretty prolific and release a lot, about 3 albums a year. But coming up, there is the next album that will come out is going to be on Flag Day Recordings, and it's called Distill. And that's an interesting one because it's something of a score album, but it's not a score to a film. It's a score to a photographer's body of work. And this photographer's name is TJ Norris. And he's really almost the producer of the project. It was his idea to reach out and show me his work and then give me the challenge of, here's a body of work. It's like 100 photographs. And how can I interpret these photographs musically and come up with something that has a kinship or an affinity to the visual work, but still has its own angle and interpretation of the work in terms of theme and narrative. So we also got Mark Wiedenbaum, who runs the disquiet.org website and runs the Disquiet Junto crowdsourced weekly sound design and composition challenge. We got Mark to write an essay to kind of talk about the very kind of collage-y nature of the photographs and the collage-y nature of the music. There's a lot of urban field recordings. There are synths, but not as many as I usually use, and lots of acoustic instruments. So we got a Mark essay in the liner notes and all of these wonderful photographs. So that the release date on that is not yet known, just because of the global pandemic and delays in manufacturing and stuff like that. But that's coming out this summer, probably. And then after that, I'm currently working on an all orchestral work, or mostly orchestral work, that's involved hiring 4 different vocalists, working with a local San Francisco guitarist, and more. So that's going to be probably end of the year, and can't really give you more details about that, but it's going to be very different and mostly orchestral, which will be fun. And then the other big project that's been taking up a lot of time and sees me logging a lot of hours on the big modular behind me is I'm currently scoring a podcast, and that's an interesting project. Not quite ready to say what the podcast is yet, but the style of the podcast is that it's talking, but they want to have audio and sound and music underneath everything as underscore. So if you start doing the math of a typical podcast episode being 30 to 40 minutes times 20 episodes per season, you're looking at 12, 14 hours of music. And to me, it seemed like a really good solution for that challenge would be building a library of music using generative techniques, where I can set up self-running patches after I select going to be atonal, and then just let it record for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. Build a library like that, so that way per episode I can write custom cues and custom underscore for very specific moments that need a certain emphasis, a certain sonic vocabulary, but we have this larger generative library of things to draw upon. So that's been, as you can imagine, taking up a lot of time, and that's ongoing because the podcast is not even really fully launched yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have music accompanying the podcast. Podcasts are about music, so music breaks. Having it to implement the audio and what.
And it's akin to writing for film too, because you have to make this you have to always carve out frequency pockets for the human voice, because you know it's underscore and it's going to be talked over, and you also have to have that interesting, very kind of classic Brian Eno-esque sense of ambience where it can't demand attention, but when you put your attention on it, it has to reward that attention. And so it's a really interesting opportunity too to also just write score that just puts you in a certain headspace and doesn't have to hit or accent certain cues or moments like you do in a film or animation or a game. So so it's pretty freeing and has been a lot of fun to work on so far.
Got a question for this, to make it so. Do you record the music and then say, okay, I mix it now with the podcast, or do you record your music at the same time you're listening to the podcast? I'm quite upset when somebody's talking.
That's a great question. And it's a question really of workflow. So I'm not mixing the podcast myself. I have other clients and podcast projects where I do recording and mixing and editing and everything. This one I'm just scoring. And so it depends on the episode. So if I'm told that the episode has been recorded and I'll get a cue sheet saying like, here are the needs for the episode. Then at that point, I'll do one of two things. I will either discuss, I will always wind up discussing with the podcast hosts what they think really requires special attention to detail. And then I will wait to compose until I get the audio. And then I will listen to that and let that inform what I'm doing. If it's a more general need, I will often have like a looping 5-minute chunk of dialogue that's just them talking about something arbitrary. And I will just stick that in a track in my digital audio workstation while I compose and while I perform, just so I kind of carve out that frequency gap for the dialogue. But because we're not hitting certain cues that often, I will often work ahead of the dialogue edit being finished. But if there's something really specific, we'll wait, get the dialogue edited, they'll send me a rough cut, and then I'll score to that.
Yeah. I was thinking, I don't know, in movie making, so yeah. The music is made before based on the scenario or the feeling, but the recording is done while the film is getting produced. times film and you've got the orchestra but recording while watching the film at the same time. It's the action or whatever is the scene.
Yeah, we do it both ways. It's also really cool to do scoring for an audio only medium because recutting something based on what the music is, if the music gives you a new idea for how to cut a sequence, it's a lot easier than recutting sound and visuals if you're doing a short film. So it's fascinating to get a rough cut, I score it, throw it back, and then to hear how the rough cut changes based on the influence of the music. It's a very cool round trip that that you also get sometimes in linear media like video and film, but not as often I find as in podcasting.
You were talking also about doing some work for some.
Yeah, so the game isn't launched, so I can't say what it is, but I just wrapped a fun, fairly straightforward video game scoring project. It's a mobile game, and so the scope of it's pretty small. And the benefit to me also was that I didn't have to write music that had to be multi-tracked, ripped apart, stemmed out, and then basically remixed live in a game engine. That definitely is something that I've done, and it's more work. The results are a lot more fascinating and emergent and different to have the game engine remix your own work. But this project was fun because it's actually an educational game, and it allowed me to. I had basically complete creative freedom, and there are a series of mini games in the game, and each one has the same characters, but the environments are different. And so I got a chance to completely change which genre of music was used on each level. So I got to write chiptune, I got to write kind of honky-tonk jazz, I got to write ambient, I got to write some like krautrock, kosmische kind of stuff, techno. So it was a really fun project to explore a lot of these genres that I don't find communicates what I need to communicate as a personal artist, but are genres that I love listening to and have a lot of experience studying. So I find it's a really fun way to just kind of expand my own musical horizons and not just stick to my own methods and crutches, frankly, sometimes of composition and style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting to see the different way music is used. Podcast, making your.
Yeah, and those worlds of personal expression and game audio also often mix and blend. It was like 2 years ago now. I didn't score the entire game because there was this game called the Blackout Club, and it's a cooperative horror game for 4 players. And so you need all this space sonically for the players to communicate to one another in real time. And they did a very smart thing where it's almost kind of a David Lynchian kind of underscore and sound design kind of leading the scenes in the game so that music wouldn't be a distraction to the actual gameplay, which is very smart. But the game company reached out to me because they were like, hey, Question Games, they're actually based here in Marin County. They were like, hey, we don't have a way to like welcome people back to the game world. We need a theme song. And so that's melodic. And so they reached out to me specifically because of my album, The Right Side of Mystery, where I made that entirely out of homemade kind of really primitive stringed instruments and percussion instruments. And the game happened to feature a city-sized subterranean musical instrument that controls people's minds. Spoiler alert. So they were just kind of like, we heard your stuff and it was just totally the right thing. Like, you are the only person we would want to write this theme music. So that goes to show you that, certainly if you build a musical practice and start to really hone your own voice, people will come to you not saying like, hey, you're a techno artist, can you make jazz? They will come to you and say, hey, you make thing X. We absolutely want thing X, but in service of a franchise or a game or something else. And that, of course, is where you get to express your truest own creative intent, just in the service of a different storytelling medium.
Just to let you know, I'm going to stop my screen sharing to free up a little bit.
Sounds good.
It was a little bit. I hope that's gonna help. Also, some people have joined. I see Andrew McGrail, I see Sasha Vanskin, and I don't know this guy called Hugo. I was talking with Hugo, who we were joking about.
Can't you ban him from the chat? Get him out of here.
I don't know.
Hi, Hugo.
I'm getting confused by all this control, but I look for the ban button. Yeah, I was talking with Hugo, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago or so, and he has started also. So he makes music and doing mixing. If you want to have the double feature, you can send your mix to Hugo and then the mastering to.
Yep, we've worked on a number of projects like that right now, and it's been really wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that's now you've got the triptych, the artist, the mixer, and the mastering. You are telling me also that part of the people you work with got Corey, who has also the jackets, the album jacket.
Yeah, as a guy who was trained as an illustrator and spent many years as a designer, and kind of came into the music scene as a punk, and really believing strongly in the do-it-yourself kind of approach, I never would have in a million years thought that I would frankly give up personal creative control of the design of my albums to somebody else. But I have, and my creative collaborator, his name is Corey Holmes, and he's a fascinating guy. He's also a super modular nerd, like all of us, and really loves music. He's based up on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. And his specialty is graphic design for entertainment. So he's done a lot of work for musicians we've all heard of, and movie studios we've all heard of, and TV networks and stuff like that. But we wound up striking up a working relationship just through shared interest in music, actually. And pretty much everything that I release, Corey winds up doing the graphic design. And sometimes that means we work with other artists to do the album art. Like on my album Shades, we hired Johan G. Winters, who is based in Sweden, I believe. Sorry, Johan, if I got that wrong. We hired an East Coast artist named Harlow Skawald for Lazulum, but sometimes Corey does the album art himself, like he did on Lithopoetics and Heliopause. And it's just, what I realized once I started working with another designer is the packaging just gets, it's like mastering. You need that objectivity and reinterpretation of the work to really make it its best version of itself. And so having someone that you've told exactly what this album is about, you're not being coy, you're not holding back, you're like, this album is about blah, and this is my theme. And then what you really need is a creative collaborator to say, yes, but did you consider taking that theme, turning it upside down and looking at it from this perspective? And you're like, no, that is bizarre, and I never would have thought of that. Do it. That's awesome. That's way better than what I would have come up with. So it's just that classic thing of, this is why people are in bands. This is why people work in agencies or companies. More people can sometimes really improve the final output just through them bringing their own unique perspective, and you not being locked into your own singular narrow vision of what your album should be and look like.
Yes, indeed. I think it's time to do a little bit the musical pause. Just checking what's at. I know that I've been wondering about the stream quality. I'm recording it, so in case the stream is not well done. I see. I've been asking. Oh, I see Andrew McGray. Will it be possible to describe the equipment behind him? Yes. So we're going to do that just after this music interlude. So stay on and explain behind it. That will be better. I'm just checking. Favorite voice at the moment refers to from Benjamin Iso. That's it. So before we go to the music interlude, I would like to thank all my Bandcamp community that allow me to do show every week and also allow me to create music. Join this community of Bandcamp. Right. So bio, and you want to say something about the piece of music that I'm going about to play or about to perform?
Sure. I've been now performing live for about 2 years without Eurorack, despite the mountain of it behind me. And given that we're in a pandemic, I figured it would be a time to shelter in place and refamiliarize myself with Eurorack, and to take an approach where, as I said earlier, I've been making a lot of generative music for this podcast project, but I wanted to get really hands-on. So this short performance is really just exploring a lot of hands-on control. And actually, I don't even think I used a single random modulation source, which is unusual for me in this performance. But it's also everything's clocked off of my Roland TR-606, which I have a really unhealthy attachment to and love of. So that's really driving the whole patch. And I think with that, we can roll into it and take questions about it afterwards.
All right. welcome back. That's really awesome. I put the picture that you sent me about the so you people in what do you have on this rack? What did you use to make this awesome music?
Well, it looks more consistent than it really is because I'm a total aesthetic whore and kind of have issues dealing with mixed manufacturers. So everything's reknobbed to look like it's all verbose, but of course it's not all verbose. Boy, what did I use? I mean, a lot of it's pretty obvious, OP1 and the TR-606. And I chose to drive everything from the 606 so I could do that final tempo change in a smooth way. It's not as smooth a transition as if you use Pamela's workout, which is what I've got. And from there, it was just it's a real mix of kind of West Coast synthesis and East Coast synthesis. So a lot of it was exploring the Rossum evolution filter, which is very Moog style and sounds really great. There's a little bit of micro VCF in there from IntelliGel, but also a lot of work with the verbose harmonic oscillator, which you can see in the top row in some of those top-down shots, as well as this really, really great, incredibly tiny wave folder by Instruo. It's called the Athru, and it is in Eurorack to my ears. I used to have a Buchla system, had to sell that for reasons, but it's the one wave folder in Eurorack that to my ears sounds absolutely like a Buchla 200E, kind of the more modern Buchla style wave folder, kind of in the Buchla 259 style. So there was some use of that. During the breakdown, there was this big, thick, distorted, gritty kick that came in that just landed once every measure or two. And that is a one-of-a-kind Eurorack module. It's actually a Bug brand DRM1 that has been converted to the Eurorack format. And it takes an ungodly amount of power to run in Eurorack. It's ridiculous. But just nothing else sounds like it. And I have a hard time not having that in the rack at all times. It actually sounds, it's got a great noise generator and it sounds amazing for hi-hats and snares too. But just the low end on it is so massive, I usually use it as a kick. Other than that, lots of envelopes, few low pass gates, but that's kind of the general overview of what was most at play in that set in the Eurorack.
There's a Benjamin Iso who's asking if for modular grid or something. Yeah,
if you want to look up this rack, it's not totally current, but it's really close. If you go to modulargrid.net, you can find me under the username Noise Jockey. And that's all one word. That's also my URL, noisejockey.net or music.noisejockey.net. You can also find me on Twitter at noisejockey. So if you just search Noise Jockey, you'll find all sorts of stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. So yeah, you can have a look at it. Yeah, I see your Morphagene has got all the button to change for Verbo style buttons because the black panel.
I have a problem. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm single-handedly helping Thonk stay in business just by how many knobs I order from those guys.
Yes, and I see also a red panel. People. There's a school between the white panel and the black panel, but I think the red panel are testing better. Yeah, I think you have got pressure points. I see. I don't know. Everybody goes for a WMD mixer nowadays.
Yeah, it's the second time I've owned it. Actually, I bought it and I was mostly working out of 2-row cases, and it was too big for a 2-row case, just too big. And so I sold it, and then my usual mixing strategy for years was 2 4-channel mixers, both going into a unity mixer. which summed and kept the stereo panning perfect. And that wound up being really, really handy. And then when I went to this monster case, the case was made by Eric Needham in San Francisco, Needham Woodworks, and all the power is his Escatonic modular power boards. And like it has one brick that's like a 9 amp power supply. It's ridiculous. When I went to this larger case, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have the room, and that performance we just saw, I think the voice count, I think there were 13 voices. And for a piece like that evolves and there's different sections that fly in and out, you want to come back to where you started a little bit. You can, it's got 2 sends. No one ever makes a mixer with enough sends. Nobody. Like every mixer needs 4 sends. End of story. But what's cool about the WMD performance mixer is that every channel has 2 inputs. And you can, an A and B, and you can have it only play A, only play B, or A plus B. So there's like a 2-channel summing mixer on every single channel. And so that's how I wound up kind of just flowing everything into that. And then because I'm a mastering engineer, of course, I have to send the reverb through a pair of EQs to get all of the bass mud cleaned up and get my phase and correlation. So having sends to do that rather than in line is always really efficient.
You have also played with but then also to send compressor from which module. Streams, I think, has got a compressor mode.
Yeah, so, the compressor mode in Streams is really good. I use that for years.
And it's nice to, got drums, get a little bit of compression.
Yep. I'm glad you brought up compression, actually. I have right after the performance mixer, I have a WMD muscle compressor, but it's not engaged. So I think that entire track, there's absolutely 0 compression on it. And I didn't even master it. That's right out of the box, not through any mastering process. So what I heard on the headphone output is exactly what was rendered into that performance.
Yeah, and I tend to use compressor and reverb to change the sound voice more than the final mix.
Yeah, compressing, it's like the old trick of when you have like room mics for drums and you just compress the hell out of those and just, it makes things feel so much bigger and more powerful. That's an awesome trick. And people forget to do, like, it's like, oh, that's a drum trick. It's like, no, it's a general technique. Using that in modular is a fantastic idea.
And I see also from Verbos, you've got the dual stage voltage controller. A nice sequencer. I tend to like what I like to call stupid sequencer. What you see is exactly what you get.
Dude,
no record button, no.
I feel a rant coming on. Yeah, I've been through so many sequencers, and there's a reason why you see a Metropolis, pressure points, and the Verbos voltage multi-stage, is that the front panel controls never ever lie to you about what state they're in. And that's what killed me about, I won't mention names, but that's what's killed me about any sequencer that has UI pagination, because you'll set sliders for channel A and then you'll go to channel B and the sliders mean nothing. Channel B has some other completely different thing going on. And then, if you want to change the sequence live, who knows how many semitones are going to jump when you start to move the sliders around. And the voltage multi-stage, everything also, what's weird about this system actually for the viewers who are into the RusticNerd stuff is that everything's going through almost everything's going through quantizers. And I have a tenderfoot quad quantizer on order, but right now it's all going through 3 2 HP tunes. So boy, those are hard to stack next to one another in a row. But so everything's running through quantizers, and the voltage multi-stage And all the sequencers I use are all, I choose sequencers around one principle, and that's immediacy. Like grab a slider, see the change, hear the change. And that is just a core thing for me. If it doesn't support that kind of workflow, I can't use it. And running, like the voltage multi-stage also lets you do glide note to note pre-quantizer. So you can do cool tricks where you can glide from note A to note B, and you'll get these trills as the voltage is quantized into semitones in the scale that you've chosen. And so I just love those kind of like unintentional tricks, running stuff into quantizers like that.
And I don't know, this is when you start on your rack, you don't know which module you're gonna like. So progressive. I love modules. Different people will have different style.
Absolutely.
Some people they like the programmation of things, and also that allows them voice or several track, that they can play. Track is memory 1, track 2 is memory 2, and that allows them. For me, I prefer the immediacy, and I don't want to program things.
Oh my God, I feel you on that one. But you're right. Like, if the UI is entirely digital, then that's a lot easier, because then like the whole UI state can change when you go from channel 1 to channel 2 to channel 3. And so something like the eloquencer or the polyan seek, those I think are much more immediate despite their entirely digital nature. But I don't have room for those yet.
Yeah. Add Barlow is asking if you could describe the recording chain from your rack to your computer.
This is going to be a very short conversation. You can't see it, but I'm sitting at my mastering desk, and my mastering desk also is where I mix. And so I've got, preamps and all this stuff. There's literally a pair of cables coming out of the Pro out. Oh, well, actually, I'll talk about the signal flow in the rack first. So everything, of course, is going into the WMD performance mixer. I am using the Verbose scan and pan as a sub mixer, because its saturation characteristics when all the gains are up super high is just luscious and awesome. But everything is summed in the performance mixer. From there, it goes into the WMD muscle as a master compressor for the track. It was disengaged for this whole track, so no compression at all. And then from there, it goes into a WMD Pro output module. I was running a Vermona twin outs for a while, because I run all balanced cable in my studio, and having actual XLRs was great. But the WMD has a separate, the Pro output has a separate 1/8-inch stereo jack for my recorder. So I can like go out to a separate recorder, separate from like sending stuff into, club mains or something like that. But from the Pro output, it goes right into an RME interface. No preamps, no coloring, nothing like that. I do all that in for this piece, I did it all in the rack. I might release this on like SoundCloud or something, and at that point I will master it through tubes and transformers and all that stuff. But for just to let people hear exactly what I was hearing, that's it. That is the entire recording chain. Very, very simple.
Yes. We've passed a little bit the top of the hour, so it's time a little bit to wrap up stuff. Just checking who joined, who I've seen. I saw Roy Shade join. I saw Matthew Campagna. All That Gone. Barlow. So thank you for joining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, put the bells on, everything. I've got modularity also. Last question. Does the MSCL comp add any noise when you use it, and why didn't you use it in the
because I didn't need to. Compressors for me are problem solvers. I use a compressor if transients are too high. I use compressors, and that's, super fast attack, very fast release. So that will be for transient shaping. If something is lacking in resonance and I want the resonance to come up, I use it in order to do that with a very slow attack and a longer release. So for me, a compressor is not just something I always have in the chain. I use it when I need it. And there was already some kind of soft compression due to saturation that I was doing on the way in, like with the 606 going into a Gozinta, and it's chained into a couple of other amplification channels. But in terms of noise, I find the muscle to be very, very quiet. I also have been considering removing it from that rack, because now this is a studio case. This is not a live performance case. And so if I'm going to compress, I'm probably going to compress into a digital compressor in the DAW or into my API 2500 in my mastering desk, something like that. But I often like to record with zero. I usually record with zero compression. I just have a lot of headroom in the recording, because then I want to be a little bit more analytical about how much of that I dial in, because that's going to change a lot if you slap a compressor on an entire mix, especially.
Yeah, you want to record as raw as possible and then fix it later with.
Yeah, that's my workflow. Others want to just like record and commit, and I totally respect that, because again, immediacy is really important. That's just not how I choose to work.
Yeah, it's yes, depending on if you are doing a performance, then you want the sound right for room you are, versus recording where you say, okay, I'm going to rework the song once it's finished and polish it master it for whatever media I'm going to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we are top. I see Régalade would join. Bonjour Régalade. C'est quoi ce truc? What's this thing? Well, it's a modular synthesizer. I think you will have to rewind to it and see how all this stuff works. It's awesome. All right, so we are reaching about the top of the hour. Memorize a little bit. So I had Nathan Moody, also known as a noise jockey. I put his bio on that, so if you check. Release many albums, you do music for video game, you do podcast. The Obsidian, so mastering work as a Obsidian sound in the albums through your skill hands. Also, I think on the mastering you wanted to, I saw you made an announcement, so talk about it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll add in our time together today, thank you everyone for tuning in, is that I've been, like everyone, I've been watching what's going on in the world and getting really angry and very frustrated. And if anyone out there has an album whose proceeds will be donated to a charity that is a not registered nonprofit to improve the state of the world that we're in, especially if it will help persons of color, the LGBT community, and any other marginalized group, I will do pro bono mastering for projects like that, compilations, albums, singles. If you are going to give a percentage of your revenue rather than all of it, I will give you a discount equal to that percentage that you will give. And that's just a call out to the music community to help me manage my rage and funnel it into something more positive so that we can share more music from more voices into the world.
Awesome from you. Yeah. So next week I've got Malarkey, and Malarkey started, or with a couple of friends. I see him on the chat. Started with a couple of friends a new label. Got a quick movie about this, so let me. there was the announcement of Error Grid Records. Malarkey is listed on this or label artist community. So we'll have Malarkey, and I think I will have Amanda Shod doing a lot of electronic. That will be the week after. I want to finish. I want to thank my Bandcamp community to allow me to do all these things. If you want to add your name to the list, go Franck. Become patron style, so really that allow me to get a little bit of creating some merch and making that on the CDs, and I'm contracting Nathan to do. That's all cool. All right, I think it's time to finish this show. Thank you everybody for joining. Usually I like to do a kind of a rewind of whoever is joined on the shoutout. So let's see. The Alphaster, Sensor Music, Bill Fetzer, Malarkey, Colorado Modular Synth Society with the Sign Mountain, Alphaster, Charter, Smooster, Benjamin Iso, Mariana Novakovic, going through Juan Rosales, also known as Phuturo, Sasha Ovsankin, sorry, this man that we need to ban, Hugo R. Paris, Tovarsi, Noise UK, of course, Roy Shade came in, Matthew Campana, Modularity, Barlow, c'est Benjamin Iso, Modularity, Regalad, All That's Gone, Dylan Sang also joined. So thank you everybody. I'll put on the events for the show next week, so a couple of minutes you will have the next event. Back to it. The reminders on. I would like to talk about the two events we had at Resident last Tuesday, so you can rewatch the show. It's an open mic, a very nice show of artists in the area. You've got Resonant Frequency that will be on the first Sunday of the month, and hopefully things are going to reopen. Speak also attend last synth. So that's a little bit. Thank you, Nathan, for being with me today. You have a last thing and outro.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's always good to chat with you, Franck, and thanks for everyone who tuned in.
Thank you, Nathan. Have a nice weekend.
Okay, bye-bye.